Hey there, Facebook. It is great to see you. Happy Thursday. I'm Sarah Heiner, and this is my health and happiness show. So I'm glad that you are here. My reminders, as always, we got a whole bunch of these. I got a whole bunch of them that we've been doing. They're in the Facebook channel. We've got all the videos if you look through there. If you don't want to do that, you can go to our YouTube channel, subscribe there. I've got hundreds and hundreds that actually I've been doing videos we've been doing through the years with all sorts of experts. I've got a great conversation today with Ray Higdon of the Higdon Group about fear, but I've got all sorts of stuff in there. I've got health, I've got weight loss, I've got child, I got home stuff, I've got bunions. I got so much stuff in that YouTube channel. So go check that out on YouTube. The Bottom Line Inc. Is the name of that channel. What else can I remind you about? I can remind you that the best thing you can do, the world is opening up, which is awesome. Vaccines, more people are getting the vaccine, and they are feeling safer and prouder, and herd immunity is growing. But the most important thing you can do for yourself, whether it's COVID, whether it's the flu, whether it's the stomach bug, whatever it is strengthen your immune system. Take good care of yourself. That, our bodies are Ferraris. We're born with Ferraris, and they know what to do. But we've kind of gummed up the works. Our lives, our choice, our eating, our bad habits, all of that. So there's so much that you could do to build your immune system and strengthen your defenses against anything and everything. The media is not talking about it. Doctors aren't talking about it. I talk about it. I've got videos in there also about immune system in Bottom Line, about vitamin D and zinc and things that will help protect you from COVID. But also we've got a great download in the chat, is a link to a free download to help you strengthen your immune system. Download it, share it. Honest to God, I just want everybody feeling confident and strong and not afraid to be out in the world, because there are germs out there. There always have been germs out there, and there will be germs out there forever. But there are things that you can do to strengthen yourself beyond masks, beyond staying away from people. We need to hug, and I want you to feel comfortable hugging. So download that. We have another download link that's going to be about pain. Same thing. I want you, sitting, aching. We're all sitting. I'm sitting 12, 15 hours at my computer. Bad news, but I walk the dog. Good news. Anyway, there's another download that's free that can help you with aches and pains and help you know how you can take care of yourself. If you have questions today, put them on into the chat, and they will be passed along to me by my friend Lauren, who is behind the scenes and behind the curtain, and always sends me her little messages on chat. So it's not my children, it's not my dog, it's not the grocery list, it's Lauren letting me know all that's going on. With that, let me welcome on Ray Higdon. And let's see, I have to push a button. Where's my view? I'm not finding my view. Where's my view? Oh, there it is. Haha. One day I'll learn. That's right. Okay. Hey, Ray. All right, let's get you on. Okay, there you go. All right, here's Ray Higdon. And he is, we're going to talk about overcoming the fear that holds you back. And this is a man who has overcome fear, challenge in such a big way in his life. Let me introduce him, and I always read it because there's so many great points that I want to be sure that I get them all. So Ray is the CEO and founder of the Higdon Group, which in 2018 was recognized on the Inc. 5000 as one of America's fastest growing companies. He has failed and he's succeeded multiple times, learning important lessons along the way about what it takes to succeed and what holds you back from those successes, most importantly, because we all do it. He has co-authored, along with his wife and partner, Jessica. You know what? How many books have you done? 3, 4?
Yeah, we've done, we together have done 3, I think. Yeah, 3, and I did an additional one.
Okay, 3 great books, including Top Earner, Multi-Level Marketing Recruiting Secrets, and his newest book, which I just read, and it's phenomenal, and we're going to talk about it now, Time, Money, Freedom, 10 Simple Rules to Redefine What's Possible and Radically Reshape Your Life. His website is higdongroup.com, so go check him out. Go check out that book. Okay, with all of that introduction, why don't you, Ray, tell your story? Talk about what, that big kind of all your fear, what the challenges, just to give a kind of a high level of why you're so darn qualified to talk about fear and getting over it.
Sure. So with that context, I would say, my parents split when I was very young. I think I was 2 or 3, and at 3 or 4, I started living with my dad and my stepmom, and it was not in the greatest household. My stepmom was very abusive, physically and verbally, although that one wasn't as hardcore. So almost every morning, I was woken up by being thrown against a closet and stomped, and told that I was terrible, told that I was a piece of crap, and I really, I look back and I think that she was someone that really struggled with friendships, and I don't think she didn't have a lot of friends, and I think maybe she was picked on at work or something, and I was the punching bag, and so the age of 12 I was able to choose to go and live with my mom, so I moved from Indiana to Florida, and not going through the whole life history, but
I don't need
um,
every day. And I
yeah,
don't need to
yeah,
get rejected at this high school prom either.
yeah, yeah. And so, you fast forward a few years, and the way that I was wired, what the Landmark Forum would call my act is I'll show you. And so, I'll show you was destructive in high school, but it was actually beneficial in careers because I fed on doubt. And so, I'd worked my way up in the corporate world to a pretty high paying salary to a position I wasn't actually on paper qualified for. And I realized something. I realized that I'd been working my way up the corporate ladder into a position where the harder I worked, the more they would pay me, but the more they would demand of me. And I was at this point, I now have, two sons at home. I'm missing all their school functions because work demands. I'm having to cancel family vacations. I look at my boss and his boss and her boss, and they're all making more money, but they're also more stressed out. And I knew that that was going to be me. And so what I really desired was freedom. I wanted my personal freedom to, do what I wanted to do and also make more money, but that wasn't an option. And so in 2004, I started doing real estate on the side. 2005, I left that job of that career of 7 years and went into real estate here in the state of Florida. So 2005, Florida real estate, what could go wrong? And so I do well for a few years. When the market collapses, I get completely wiped out. I wipe out my IRA, my 401k. I start selling furniture. I go through a divorce. I end up in foreclosure. Then I end up living on my buddy's couch. And so it was a very hard fall from grace because I had been doing well in real estate. From there, I really didn't know what I was going to do. I got very depressed. I was drinking heavily. Was not the model father, that's for sure. Wasn't the model anything. And no one was hiring. Everyone else was being crushed by real estate. My credit was shot, and I didn't know what I was going to do. I had a friend invite me to check out the network marketing opportunity he was doing, which I had sworn off of. I had tried them in the past. I was like, no, no, no. I never wanted to do it again, but I really didn't have any options. I mean, again, no one's hiring. My credit shot. I'm
Right.
down to two credit cards that are still allowing me to charge things magically, and I decided, you know what, I'm going to make this thing happen. And long story short, I became the number one earner in that company. A lot of hard work, a lot of grit, a lot of lessons, and now I started dating my wife. We got married in 2011, and now we teach people how to do well in their business. Most, not all, but most of our business is with network marketing companies and leaders and reps. But I've also coached, real estate people, insurance people, and we love what we do now, and we're glad to be here. So hopefully that wasn't too long.
No, it's fine. So, but I want to tease out a piece of it because that was, I mean, the challenges that you've overcome were phenomenal, right? So that, the abuses, and you're not alone. There's so many people who are
Sure.
tragically abused in one way or another to,
Yep.
lesser or greater extents of it, people who have lost. Underneath though, talk about the fear that was created, because again, there's fear that holds us all back from either breaking free. Every day you woke up probably and were like, please don't do this to me, right? And what that did to you, you talk in your book about that you kind of became invisible as a result. You were afraid of people. You were afraid there was something at school that happened. And then same thing, the fear financially, when there you were $1 million in debt
Yep.
and, you'd lost everything because
Yeah.
there are people that would definitely puddle in the face of all of that. And yet you didn't. So talk about the fears that, your fearful demons that were in there.
Yeah, and there's different layers to it. In that, one of my maybe my biggest fear, I actually didn't even discover until about a year and a half ago. Didn't even know it was a fear. I knew I had this certain personality trait, but I didn't actually know why. And I'll get to that. So, I mean, you're absolutely right. I mean, I for most of my life, I slept in a ball because that gave me a reaction time to when the fists were coming. And I slept on my stomach because it didn't hurt as bad, when
Right.
my back was punched.
Right.
And so, like, even, not even 2 years ago, I still slept that way. I've actually fixed that now because it's not very healthy for you to sleep on your stomach. And, so yeah, I mean, there was that real fear when I was a little kid of, what's going to happen next. And but I the you know one of the fears that has been with me my entire life that I wasn't even aware of, was a fear of betrayal.
Mhm.
And that fear of betrayal made me keep everyone at a distance. And so I'll tell you, and I talk about this, I believe, in chapter 2. But my wife and I, we were at a charity dinner I think it was last January, not that long ago. And my one of our neighbors comes around the corner, and we are on the board, the board for the charity. She comes around the corner and she goes, "Hey, did you see the Belize trip?" And I'm like, "No." And she said, "Well, it's awesome. It's a 5-day trip to Belize. It's a private jet, private yacht, private chef, private island, only 5 couples." And my wife is like, "Oh," right? Like, she's like, "That sounds like the greatest thing ever."
Right.
To me, that sounds like sheer hell.
Wow.
And I mean, I don't say it because everyone's all excited, and I'm just like, "Oh, great."
Right.
And I'm thinking, "No, please, God, don't let us win that.
Right.
Please don't let us be one of the 5." And so on the way home, I'm like, "What the hell's wrong with me?" And I'm driving home, and I'm thinking, I look over at my wife, and she's beautiful. She's super smart. She's so talented, so awesome, social butterfly. And, like, I want to be a good husband. I want to be like husband of the year. I want to be like her champion in every way. But here I am, this fuddy duddy that doesn't like social gatherings. I don't like, that kind of stuff. And so I decided to pluck that weed. And that's a concept we talk about in the
Right.
book. Is here was a character trait that was not congruent with who I wanted to be. And
And
so,
what that character trait was, that was it that you didn't want to be with people, or you didn't trust them? Because there was also another story in the book, which I
yeah,
featured in my blog today, which,
yeah,
Lauren, if we can post the link to my blog today, would be awesome, about you and you trusted someone at school,
yeah,
your
I'll
your
share that,
counselor. Right.
because at the time I didn't know that.
Right.
So this is what led me to that discovery.
Mhm.
Is I didn't know it was a trust issue. I just thought maybe I'm just super introverted. Maybe I just, don't like being social.
Right.
And so I'm like, what the hell's wrong with me? I'm going to dig into this. And so I got with one of my coaches, who's a hypnotist, a mindset coach, and he helped me uncover and remember a major source of betrayal in my life, which, when I was in the 3rd grade, my teacher knew that something was off, right? She knew that something,
Right.
I don't know what she suspected. I don't know if she knew whatever, but she had me start meeting with a guidance counselor. One day she says, "Hey, I want you to start meeting with a guidance counselor." I'm like, "Okay, I don't know what's going on."
Mhm.
And so I start meeting with her, and, she starts asking me questions, and I literally never got to talk to anybody. I mean, when I was home, I had to be outside until it was dark by myself. And I wasn't allowed to go to friends' house. I wasn't allowed to have people over. When I came inside because it was dark, I was to sit in my room until, my stepmom went to sleep, and then
And
she'd tell me to go to bed.
did you
And
didn't have siblings? Did you have siblings?
I had a stepsister,
Mhm.
and the later years, she became sympathetic to my plight, and was actually, you know, uh, she was rebelling against how I was being treated later in my life. In the early years, I don't think she really understood what was going on.
You were young, but at this
Um,
point, so you were alone. You literally could trust
Alone.
no one. So you're talking to the teacher, you'd go home, you'd be alone. You talk to the
Yeah.
counselor.
And so I started opening up to the guidance counselor because it felt nice. It felt nice to talk to somebody. And she's asking me all these details and I'm sharing away because no one ever asked me what I thought. I wasn't allowed to have an opinion.
Right.
And then one day I show up for the meeting and it's her and my stepmom and my dad. And she proceeds to say every single thing I've ever told her because she thought it was so outrageous because there's some crazy stories in there.
Mhm.
And she thought it was so outrageous that I just needed attention. And I know looking back, she was trying to help. And, but she definitely didn't. It was not helpful at
Right.
all. It was a very bad day. Life got harder after that. And, but at that point, I didn't realize it. But at that point, I turned all trust to other humans off. So I
Mhm.
no longer trusted people.
Right.
And so how that showed up in my professional career many decades later is, I would go and speak at an event and I'd speak, my biggest audience was 23,000 people. I'll speak at it, multiple times, 5,000, 10,000, 20,000, and I'll rock that stage. And then as soon as I'm done, I'm beelining it to my hotel room. And I really didn't know why, but I would get social anxiety. I would literally start to shake by just being around people that wanted to talk to me. It makes no sense. And when Jess wants to go to a social gathering, I would be like, oh, do we have to go? Or we'd go, hey, can we leave? I was always trying to get out of social situations. I didn't want to speak. I didn't want to connect. I didn't realize that what I was actually doing is keeping people at a distance so they couldn't hurt me.
Right.
And what happens with that is that's never how it's translated. It's translated as you're a jerk,
Right.
or you're an egotistical maniac, or you think you're better than everybody. I actually thought I was worse than everybody, and I thought that my self-worth just wasn't there.
Right.
And so addressing that and realizing that, one question that my coach asked me, he said, well, guess what? You could still, even with this awareness, you could still be betrayed. But what conclusion do you draw from that? And it took me some time, but he helped me out and he said, it's their loss. And
Mhm.
so that really kind of clicked with me. It's like, you know what? I do have good intentions. I do want to help people. I do want to make a difference. I'm not out to, be malicious or greedy or selfish or whatever. Yeah, it is their loss. And so that has completely altered me socially. So, I no longer dread going to the social situations. I no longer dread connecting with people, knowing that I could still be lied to or betrayed or whatever, but that would be their loss. And for me to keep everyone at bay is just not a smart, way to show up.
So it's amazing to me though, when I hear stories like this, that, so that's enormous. And yet you face those fears and you push through it. Right. And then that could have been your landmark act, that I'll show you because you're you're like my competitive daughter. The best way to get her to motivate her is go, someone else could do it. And then,
Yeah.
okay, I'll show
Or
you.
or you can't.
Right,
That's the
exactly.
better
Right,
one.
one of the
Like I
right, no,
love that. Like
right,
I
exactly.
that
So
nourishes me.
exactly. So so it always amazes me and fascinates me that when the stories of people that face those fears and faced what you dealt with as a child, and then faced, you were $1 million in debt, you were the top of the world, and then you were the bottom of the world and ruined, and you pushed yourself back, and that people are able to do that, and that kind of fears, those are huge fears. Fears come in all shapes and sizes. Some people are a little bit fearful and yet they get paralyzed. So I don't know if you know the answer to this, but what's your opinion? Like, is it nature or nurture, like to be able to overcome fears? Because the goal of this conversation is for anybody that's out there that has fears, and oh, by the way, that's everybody that's out here that's watching has some fear or another. But
Sure.
I don't like people to go, I'm just fearful, I can't help it. I'm just a worrier, I can't help it. And that, so that, is it like some people definitely are born vulnerable, I think more sensitive than others. But, what's your opinion in terms of nature and nurture? And can anybody be coached and taught to face those fears, see those fears, face those fears, and overcome their fears?
Yes, I believe anyone can, but there's a couple elements that are required. One, they have to want to, right? I wanted to. I didn't like my personality and how I was showing up, so I wanted to fix it. Okay, so that's number one. Number
Let me
two
interrupt you for a
is
second, though. You didn't like your personality, but did you know you were fearful? Or was it just that you weren't happy? Like for people to get down to that it's fear, and do they have to? Like, to find that fear that because that's such a
I didn't know it was fear.
right, but it's such a
I,
deep emotion. Like you think it's
yeah,
this, but
yeah,
really deep down inside, and to really expunge it, you need to see and feel see that.
yeah. Well, I'll give you. So yes, I did not know it was fear. I just knew it was a part of my personality that didn't wasn't congruent with who I wanted to be. So I wanted change. But I'll give you an example. Um, I had a client that she came to me and she said, "Hey, what can I study to help me think better about money?" And
Mhm.
she said, as soon as I start making more money, I feel like I get anxious, I get nervous, and I start to sabotage. And I just took a wild stab just from doing this for a lot of years. And I said, "Do you have a sibling?" And she's like, "Yeah." And I said, "Okay, describe that relationship." And her sister was someone who constantly screwed up and got negative attention. She was always the champion, got positive attention. And so, you know, taking all of our, we talked quite a bit here, but at the end of the day, she was associating the more achievement she had, that it was making her feel bad about her sister, which
Oh,
had
that
nothing to do with her achievements.
so she had success guilt.
Yes. And specifically because she felt like the more accolades the world gave her was kind of like mom and dad giving her accolades when her poor sister over there is not doing too well. And so, that's something you'll
Mhm.
very difficult to know without a third party looking in. And
Right.
so I think that's another element of you to really and truly dig into your deep fears. You almost always, I think, need a third party to look in and kind of analyze and say, "Hey, have you thought about this?" And so that's definitely what helped me too.
So when you have hurdles, when people have hurdles in their lives and challenges, um, is it generally a fear that's underneath it? They'll kind of go again, I'm no good at money. I can't sell. You and I before we went live, I was talking about I don't know how you can make 20 phone calls a day and have so much energy because I'm like a turtle, right? I'm out there. I'm like, I seem personable right now, but I promise you, I get off of this and I go, okay, let me go into my little cave for a couple minutes and regenerate. It doesn't take me long, but it
Sure.
comes back out. So, but does like to underneath any of those challenges, is there always some fear of success, fear of harming someone, fear of not letting people down? I mean, those are some of the common fears that run around.
I mean, I really think so. I think that not only is it a fear, but it's something that came from an event in the past. And I think that usually there's some kind of engagement with an authority figure, or teacher, mom, dad, uncle, whatever, that that instilled something. One thing that I remember reading, and this was very enlightening for me, but I remember reading one of Marianne Williamson's
Mhm.
books, and she talks about how as girls are growing up, right, as they're the dad or the daughter on on dad's knee,
Mhm.
right, and they start to blossom, and it starts to get weird for dad, and maybe
It gets
hey,
weird for girls too. Middle
let's not
school,
sit
they
on my
go
lap
on. Yeah,
anymore.
yeah.
And some draw the conclusion that it's my body that has disconnected me from my
Mhm.
dad, so they gained weight.
Oh, that's
And
interesting.
so if they draw that association that, oh my God, my connection with my dad is less now because I'm in great shape, then let me gain weight. Maybe I'll gain that back. But then they keep it on and they don't remember or even know why they ever gained it. And that's not my revelation. That's
Right.
from, Marianne Williamson. And so I've discovered all kinds of things like that. We had at last year, we do an annual event called Rank Makers Live. And last year we did live laser coaching. We're just bringing people up and be like, what's your problem? And, and so this lady is like, I just can't do a video. Oh, no, thank you. And I just said, what happened? What was the instance in your life where you were really embarrassed?
Mm-hmm.
And she, she was kind of taken off guard by that. And then she recalled that at her, I think, high school graduation, she got up there and really screwed up the speech or something like that, and people made fun of her and stuff. And so she's been projecting that on any public display or speech or anything ever since. And so I told her, I'm like, listen, those kids can't hurt you anymore. They're not around to mock you. And if someone does mock you, guess what? There's people out there that you could inspire. And so I tell her, I want you to do your video now. And we break the connection. She does a video. We come back from break. We review her video, and it's amazing.
Wow.
And she's been doing a video every day since for like a
That's
year.
awesome.
And so, like, but without that, you're fighting uphill. And here's, I heard something great from Bob Proctor just the other day, and he said, we don't express anxiety, we suppress it.
Mm-hmm.
So for achievers like me, like you, like many, for achievers, I liken it to, you take your things that happen to you, the trauma, the abuse, whatever, losing it, being made fun of, being, having your heart ripped out, being, mistreated, betrayed, etc. And you kind of shove it into a closet, and then you start stacking awards in there and saying, see, those things don't bother me.
Yep.
Look, I got Inc. 5000. Look, I'm a best-selling author. Look, I got a successful company. Look, I got kids now. But the problem is you can never fully block it out. And so for you to tap into your potential, you need to be able to say, okay, this happened and I don't have to dwell on it, but this is why I reacted. This is how I show up this way. And I can choose to show up differently. And so that's very different than trying to stack achievements against and suppress.
Right. And hide it away. And I want to just, in terms of the woman that was afraid of, what they were all saying that failed on stage, another landmark lesson that I recall very well is that when we make those mistakes, and for us, it's magnified, right? The whole world saw us trip, and that it's the biggest thing in the world that happened to us. But the fact of the matter is, they forgot.
No one remembers.
No one remembers. No one paid attention 5 minutes later. And if she called up every single person in that audience today, they would have no idea or recollection. So that we spend our lives killing ourselves on some stupid thing that we did, and literally nobody remembers it whatsoever.
Right.
They could care less.
It's true.
Yeah.
It's true.
So, which is an important.
They got their own stuff going on. They got their own issues that they blow out of proportion.
Right. They're worried about what they, steps they tripped up when they went onto stage.
Right.
But that's a really important lesson for people to realize, because we get so afraid of the judgment and these things that happen, and it just holds us back so desperately.
Yes.
So let's talk about some of the strategies for overcoming those challenges. You had, I don't know if I wrote this down because you inspired me to write it down, or it was something that was in your book about, like, fear holds us back from 90% of our life. And yet we avoid like a 1% problem. Like, to me, I don't know if that came from your book or if it was something that I said, like, because fear holds us back from so much. And yet that, like, it's really a small problem that we avoid, and it's easy to get past it if we want to.
Yeah. And we also, like, our subconscious wants us safe, right? And it will do weird things to make us safe. So I'll give you one example that I don't know that I have this in the book, because I don't know that I had this revelation by the time we finished the book. So my whole life, I have really struggled with remembering names. And I've read books on memory. I worked with a memory guy for a little bit. It's just like terrible. And so I decide, you know what, I'm going to pluck that weed. That's an area I just don't like. after I figured out the social anxiety thing, I'm like, you know what? I'm going to tackle this next, right? This is a part of my personality I don't like. People come up, say, "Hey, Ray," and I'm like, "Hello,
I've
you."
been to 6 of
And
your events, don't you remember? Right.
what's that? Yes,
I've been to
exactly.
6 of your events,
Oh, oh, oh,
and I
they'll
was at
say
dinner.
something.
Right.
They're like, "Oh, I've had dinner at your place 3 times." I'm just like, "Oh my God, like I'm terrible." And so I started doing something. So and it came to two realizations. So first, before I enter into a party, I say, "Thank you for my memory, thank you for my memory, thank you for my memory." And I remember like 95% of the names now.
Right.
However, what I realized is my desire to not be connected to people gave me a bad memory,
Interesting.
because if I don't remember people's names, then they probably won't like me. That's the kind of underhanded sabotaging stuff that your subconscious will do.
Right.
It was actually preventing me, no matter how hard I tried, from remembering names, because it's like, you know what? If if they don't think I like them or remember them, then they can't possibly like me.
Right.
So
Wow.
it's wild. So you'll do things like that where you're sabotaging. This is one of the things where people will go from relationship to relationship to relationship, and somehow the new person always turns into the old person. Well, you're the only constant.
Mhm.
They're not all the same
Right.
people, but you are. And so like that's you will create sabotage without that understanding of the fear.
Wow. So again, fears are underneath these challenges and challenges are masking these fears. And
Right.
it's so to be able to get to the fears, how do you start? So you talk about identifying the challenges.
Yeah, identify a character trait that you don't like and be willing to dig in. Be willing to say, why am I that way? What causes that? And for me, and I suspect for most people, you may need some third party help there. You may need a coach. You may need a mentor or therapist or whatever, to help you link that, because there's a lot of times, me not remembering people's names, I would not associate with my guidance counselor from third grade.
Right.
That wouldn't make any sense, but
Right.
they were linked. And so, getting help in that arena. And there's a few books that talk about this. Our book definitely talks about it. The Big Leap by Gay Hendricks talks about it. And there's another one that talks about it. Psychocybernetics kind of talks about it, Martz. But yeah, it's you showing up in a way that is like you said, masking the fear, but
Right.
it's characteristics that you don't like, that you wish were improved with yourself.
Now,
And
some people are not as self-aware as you are, and some people are not as dedicated to being that, or
true.
this is my new thing lately, that people are so disassociated between their mind and their body and their emotions, and they're all just kind of these, I hate to talk about Mr. Potato Head, given all that's going on
Oh,
right now, but it's like,
so
parts
controversial.
that are stuck together, right? That are stuck on each other, but they're not necessarily connected. They're just these puzzle parts. But
Right.
um, there are a couple of things you talk about. They were like where you say, ask yourself, even if you don't want to dig into your fears to overcome the challenges, what would my life be like if I didn't have that in my way? And you talked about the guy, your boss at Winn-Dixie,
Yeah.
um, who was the was stuck, like he was the biggest stuck thing in the world at a job he hated and but
Yeah.
refused to leave.
And I'm forever grateful for him. I mean, he helped me at a very impressionable age. So when I was, I think, 18, I want to say, I, for the previous several years, had been hanging out with a rough crowd. I'll Show You was very destructive back then. Very, very involved in drugs and the wrong type of people, but I was the wrong type of people. So I wasn't the innocent little, babe in the woods. And so to get away from that, I took 3 jobs, and one of them was working at Winn-Dixie at the graveyard shift. And so there was a manager there, and I went to him. I'm impressionable. I'm like, I'm gonna, how does this stuff work? And he had been there at the time. He was, I want to say I think he was 32 or something like that. And I said, hey, you're the manager here. Like, what's your career plan? He goes, oh, you know what? I'm going to stick it out here. And I've been here 12 years. I'm like, oh, you must love it. He goes, oh, I hate it. And I'm like, no, that doesn't make sense. Like, what do you mean? And I said, well, if you hate it, like, I'm asking because I don't know. I don't know the world yet. I'm too young, right? And so I said, well, if you hate it, why are you stick around? He goes, well, at this point, I'm making so much that I probably couldn't go anywhere and make any more. And at the time, I think he was making like $12 an hour.
Mhm.
And back then that was, not bad. It was above minimum wage at least. And that stuck with me every single career I had after. I asked myself, am I staying here because I don't feel I can do better? And if that was the case, I had to get the hell out of there. And so, I remember leaving, I worked for a county government and worked my way up to a very good salary, which when you're in county government and you got a good salary, you don't leave, right? You just don't. I mean, unless you're stealing things, you're not
Right,
going to get canned.
right,
They have an unlimited budget.
right.
You're there
Great
forever.
pennies, right, right.
That's how it works. And so I remember, everyone was shocked when I left there, because I was no longer being challenged and I no longer, enjoyed it. And I went to the private sector to challenge myself and not settle, not settle for something that was, less than what I felt I could do. And
Right, so
so
again,
I'm
you
very,
were looking at the other side. If my life doesn't change, like,
yeah,
then what would my life be like if I got over this fear?
yeah,
And what will my life be like if I just stayed here in my safe space?
right,
Um,
right. And interestingly enough, that manager, uh, a few years ago, maybe 4 or 5 years ago, the local newspaper wrote an article about my wife and I. And that's when mom knew I had made it. I had shared the stage with Tony Robbins, Bob Proctor, Kiyosaki, spoken in front of 20,000. None of that meant anything, but the local paper, now I've made it.
you could show
She's so
that to the
cute.
girls.
Yeah.
Right.
Huh?
You could show that to the girls at the,
Exactly.
right,
She was so cute. She cut out clips and she sent it up to Indiana, to the paper in Indiana. You
wow.
should feature my son. And so it was great.
How did
But
that happen?
Chad,
Right.
the manager, happened to see that and reached out to me. He says, hey, man, I don't know if you remember me. I'm like, boy, do I.
Right.
Like, this was, 20 years later. And I
Wow. Right.
remembered him vividly because he
Right.
had taught me a major lesson that he
Right.
didn't know.
Right.
Still with Winn-Dixie, still hated it. And, is what it is.
Right. And that's, again, this is what I want, there are a whole bunch of people again watching that feel like they can't change.
Yeah.
And the whole point of this whole conversation is, yes, you can.
Yes.
You do not have to be stuck, and you can face those fears, and we're going to talk in a second about, some other strategies for it. But I want to ask you, because again, this is so fascinating to me. So there you were, I'm going to call you a gang member. I don't know if you were in a gang, but whatever it was,
Not that far off.
you weren't in a gang, but you were in a bad crowd. You were doing
Yes.
drugs. You were a mess. You were every mother's nightmare, I'm going to call you.
Yes.
Right. If you were my child, I'd be upset.
Yes.
But I'd be very proud of you now. And I love that your mom is now very proud of you. But my point is, and you were a teenager, like, to find the strength to have that realization that you're in a bad place and to walk away from that group, because that was good or bad, that was your crowd, right?
Right.
So that, that's why do people join gangs, because that is their family when they don't have anyone else, for good or bad.
Right.
That really is a lot of the motivation in there. So again, the strength and courage that it takes to realize you're in a bad place and then to step away, I
Yeah.
think is enormous. And credit to you. And, talk about that for a second, because I think there are
Yeah.
a whole lot of people who are back to fear, afraid to make that leap from their safe place, even if they know they're in a horrible marriage, a horrible
Yeah.
job, horrible, friend group, whatever it is.
Yeah. So, I mean, I had several bad things happen. I was totally in love with this girl. Found out, she cheated on me with two of my buddies. I tried to kill myself, ended up getting Baker acted. And I remember after that just thinking, you know what, I got to change. And I got out of that facility and I hadn't seen my mom in quite a while. And I just said, hey, can I come home? And she, let me come home. I stopped responding to every phone call. I stopped hanging out with all of them. And it's interesting because just maybe 2 months ago, one of my old, running buddies, one of my old, guys from high school, and actually this was technically after high school. We hung out in high school, but then a couple years after high school, we were still hanging out. And we were living in a, party house, et cetera. And a couple months ago, one of those guys commented on a post I did, and I forget what post it was, but it was something about, something inspirational. And he says, to be honest, Ray, I thought you'd either end up in prison or a casket.
Wow.
And it was interesting for my now crowd to see that,
Right.
because that's so different than how I am now.
Right.
But that was, very real. And so although I cut off all ties and didn't hang out with them, didn't, went years without seeing any of them, it's interesting the kind of respect that some of them, still give me. We happen to be connected on Facebook, and they, see my stuff.
When you made that break, did you feel free or did you feel guilty, or yes, both of each?
Part of me felt a little afraid, because, I was involved in some heavy stuff, a lot of drugs, a lot of, in fact, strangely enough, like the day maybe after, I think it was either the night or the day after I stopped hanging out with everyone, a lot of them were in this like big fight, and a lot of them got arrested, and you know there was some bad stuff. I actually, years later, I had to testify at a murder trial, and it was, pretty weird and surreal. It was actually my friend's little brother, who I didn't really hang out with him, but my good friend's little brother had killed a guy, and it was close to where I used to live, and I had to go in there and testify. It was very strange.
Wow.
So I think I didn't feel free. That's for sure. But I think two things. One, I had some fear. I was afraid of running into them, in the near future,
Mhm.
because you don't
And
know
then what
how
they do, they
that
pull you back,
you
right?
don't know how that's handled.
Yeah.
And two, I had something new, which was most important. I had something new to focus on, which was career.
Mhm.
And so I very much put every ounce of effort into my career of rising the ranks, of working the
Right.
way up the corporate ladder, et cetera. So it gave me something positive to focus on. But I was looking over my shoulder, pretty often, because you don't know how
Right.
it's not usually reacted to positively. You're seen
Well,
as a traitor, you're seen as, someone, no, now you're better than
right,
us, kind of thing.
in that circumstance.
Yes.
Right. Yeah. So you talked about that you focused on your career. So I think that's a good segue into some of the other steps for overcoming your fear. And you're a big man of action. Like
Hmm.
the actions, the more you're in action, the more success that you have. The more you're in action, you're able to push through some of these things. So you talk about you start with one small step at a time.
Yeah. So, we talk about a process, called vision stepping, and that is, having a vision of what you want to accomplish, of where you want to go, and, what is the first step. And so I'll give you, one of my favorite examples. It came from, we did 2 seasons of a reality show where
Mhm.
people came from all over the world to compete for a job with us. And I remember I was coaching one of the contestants, and I said, what's one major thing in your life that you want to accomplish, that would be, meaningful? And they said, well, my parents have done so much for me, and I just want to, reward them for being, so supportive of me, and I want to buy them a house. And I said, okay, awesome. That's great. How long have you had this goal? 10 years. Okay. And what progress have you made, on this goal? And you could tell that, she had pitched this idea many times. She
Yeah.
had the pitch down. And she said, well, I've shown my parents, different houses. And I said, okay, how much money have you saved for it? She hadn't saved any. Do what kind of house? Do you know what the payment plan? I want to buy it cash. I'm like, okay, I
But
want
she
to
has
buy it
money.
cash.
Right.
You got no money saved. You're in California. Okay, how much per month can you put aside? She said, $100. Okay. How old are your parents? They're in their late 60s. So by the time they're 150 years old, they'll have that house.
They'll have a bungalow
They'll have a bungalow.
in
It'll
the
be
desert.
amazing.
Right.
And you kind of thought about that a little bit. And so that is indicative of a lot of people. A lot of people want to do some amazing, impact or change or help the homeless or the hungry or the abused or the whatever. They have this huge goal of a huge why, a huge, thing that they want to make a difference on, but they never take the first step. They never open the bank account and put some money in it. They never research how much is financing, because at $100 a month, let's just rule out paying cash. That ain't happening. And so
Right.
like, they don't do the next step. They just master the pitch. And so a lot of people have mastered the pitch of why they do what they do, but they haven't actually progressed. And
Well,
so
is that
vision
fear
stepping
that's holding
is,
her back? Like, it's easy to talk about that I've got this goal, but then they're deep inside, she's afraid of whether or not she can really do it or whatever. Like, I
sure.
always say that you can't fail if you don't try.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But the more that I believe the more that you pitch that thing you want to do, but you're not actually in integrity in the pursuit of it, the
Mhm.
more you damage yourself,
Right.
the less you believe yourself.
Right. You're
And so the more promises you make that you don't keep,
Mhm.
I think as a human, that has to affect you in some way. That has to damage your own credibility, which if you can't trust you, why the hell should anyone else? And
So you recommend people then to take small steps that you've got kind of
what's
action
the
steps
next
kind of.
step?
Right.
Take the next step. What's the next step? So, for example, I had a friend that he had a goal of, he attends a church that he loves, and there were a lot of families that go to that church that are very, in poverty, and sometimes they can't send their kids to school with lunch. And so he had a goal of, I want to provide lunches for all these different families. And I said, okay, how long you had this? You've been thinking about it for a couple of years. I'm like, how about we feed one? How about we get one family under the belt, right? Like, why don't we start actually impacting somebody before
Mhm.
you can impact everybody?
Right.
And that's how you inspire people. I love Tony Robbins' story where he talks about. I mean, now he feeds millions of people a year, but it started with one family. Then it started with a minivan where he would load up and he'd impact 5 families.
Right.
And so like, you do what you can right now, not in the future, not a blueprint, not a perfect, I'm going to impact everybody, but who can we impact right now? And I think that's what's, most important.
I love that. So, Vicky asked a question. Actually, I was going to ask a similar question. She asked about how did you find what fueled your passion? I'm going to broaden that question because a lot of people, it's all easy to say, find your why. You talk about finding your why in your book,
Sure.
finding your passion or whatever it is. A lot of people don't know where to start. Like they just don't know. They're earnest, they're hardworking, that like they just don't even know where to begin, especially people who have been focused on other people, mothers in particular, who are so focused on family, focused on their kids. Now the kids are gone and they're going, oh, what do I do now? And they don't know how to find what fulfills them. So, what's
Yeah.
your advice? How do people start to find what that path might be?
Two things. One is, for a lot of us, it comes from our past wounds. It comes from our past scars, I should say, not wounds, but our past scars. So for me, impacting kids, I'm on, 2 different charity boards for kids. I'm helping a foster care program next month and speaking at a ball and a fundraiser. And so, I think about my story can impact a lot of kids. And one of the main missions of the book is to share that you can have a bad life, you can have a bad past and still create a great life. And that great life can inspire people. And so that I would say is the number one source is, where were you neglected or abused or traumatized, or what obstacles did you overcome? Because the fact that you survived them is an inspiration to those people who are still struggling with that. There are plenty of people that went through child abuse that, unfortunately, that has been the reason that they didn't get that promotion or didn't succeed in business or didn't have a great relationship or, don't know how to parent. Because a lot of kids, that have been abused, they never felt the loving embrace of someone. And so they struggle with parenting. And I'll be honest, I've had to do a lot of work on that, and that never had a deep conversation with dad. I know that didn't exist. And
Right.
so like I've had to learn how do I learn this stuff, because I didn't experience it like most people. And so I say that's the number one. Number two is go out there and do something. I have friends that they run a company called Unique, and they just heard about a story of one of their friends who had been sexually abused, and they said, "Man, we have the money, we should do something about this." And neither of them had been victims,
Right.
but they were inspired by someone's story, and so they started a company to fund sending women to these retreats that help them heal. And so I think they've helped like 8,000 or 9,000 women. They've sent them for free to a center to help them with healing. That's extremely admirable. Now they didn't have the trauma themselves. They didn't have the abuse themselves, but they went out there and did something. They felt the goodness of that, and they decided to really, pedal down on that. And so I would say, if you didn't deal with trauma, abuse, or things like that, you're probably in the minority, but you don't want to have victim envy. I've had people tell me that. They're like, man, I really wish I went through some of your stuff. So I'm like, no, you don't. You don't want that. That's silly. But some people overthink things. So you go and do what you can and find that feeling. Um, one of the things that helped me in my career that I totally didn't plan was me sharing the story of reconnecting with my dad after 13 years of not talking to him. And I didn't realize that that story would go on to generate hundreds of letters from people that reconnected with their dad, their
Right.
mom, their sister, their brother, their aunt, their uncle. And so, go out there and do something. You don't have to, maybe you go and feed the homeless, and maybe you find that, man, I really like this. Or maybe you go and serve at a soup kitchen, or maybe you go and Habitat for Humanity or something like that to really find your passion, what moves you.
I think there are actually a couple points I want to underscore on that. One is that, like, and I don't know if this is under Vicky's question, that people think that they have to find their one passion. And what you're saying here is actually passion can exist. You can have many passions,
Sure.
and that it doesn't have to be a single, this is my soul's journey. Now,
Yeah.
there could be some primary one, but it's okay if you have multiple and you find one, and if you feel like you're doing good and you're inspired by that. The other thing that you said, and this I think comes through powerfully in the book, when you're talking about people finding what they want to sell out there, like your life, like through life, everybody has something. Like, you think your life is boring and it's just you and it's just what you dealt with, but it's fascinating to someone else out there, and that everybody has their unique story to tell, and everybody has their unique skills to share. And
Yeah.
then we don't realize it, but we're all fascinating creatures that other people can learn from you. So that, not to diminish, again, back to like the self-talk of, and
Right.
limiting beliefs. Um,
Right.
you and I can talk for hours. I want to just real quickly talk about, speaking of limiting beliefs, your wife Jess had an exercise that she went to a seminar that they did, which I think was such a great exercise, the limiting beliefs. Again, back to fear, and call it limiting beliefs, call it fears, call it whatever it is, they're all variations, and how do we break through? And I love this exercise. So can you talk about the limiting beliefs exercise real quick?
Yeah, it's where, you identify the belief that you're holding, and you just identify, okay, what's the exact opposite? If I flip that, what is the exact, opposite? So um maybe I know one of my fears many years ago was investing in a coach or investing, putting a lot of money into a mastermind or a coach or whatever. So, what's the fear? Oh, that, I'm going to lose it all. I'm not going to get my money's worth. It's not going to be, what's the flip side of that? I learned something that completely alters the speed of the growth of my business, and I get to impact more people.
Right.
And I've seen, that scenario play out many, many, many times. So I'm going to lose, or I'm going to look
Right.
stupid, to I'll have a great story.
I think
and
that thing
so
was about her limiting belief was that she was too young for what
yes,
she was doing. And then
yeah,
she flipped that into a
youth is
strength.
power.
Right. Right. So it was great. You write it on one side of the paper, then you write the opposite, the limiting belief on one side, and then the opposite, literally flip it over and
Yeah.
switch your whole perception on it.
Yeah.
Um,
And just the
right.
visual and physical act of doing that, you start to, shred the fabric of reality between the two dimensions. And so it is a very powerful exercise, because if you stare at the one side and that's it, then you're probably going to stay where you are, because everything involves some kind of risk.
Mhm.
Just going to a social event, you could, slip and fall, you could look like an idiot, you could
Right.
rip your dress, whatever. But on the flip side, you could meet the man of your dreams, or you could, connect with that amazing charity that totally fulfills your heart.
Yep.
And so, it's looking at, the flip side. When you feel that fear, say, okay, quickly, what's the exact opposite of this?
Right.
What might happen for the
Right.
good?
Right. Love it. Real quickly, one last question. Speaking of fear, the world is opening up. People are so afraid of COVID. They're so afraid, even, you got vaccinated, but you still have to stay away, all that sort of stuff. Do you have any advice for people as the world is opening up in terms of facing their fears of COVID? I know you're not a doctor and you don't play one on TV, but
Correct.
as people are, going back to the office, trying to resume some kind of normalcy, do you have any advice for people in terms of facing those fears?
Yeah. So there's there's a few things there. In the book, um, The Power of Your Subconscious Mind by Joseph Murphy, which was written many, many, many years ago. I think the 30s, maybe. And there's a case study in there where he talks about a patient. I think it was a patient of his, where the guy had cancer, and started taking, this kind of medication, whatever. And he started, feeling better, and tumors, started shrinking, and things were going well. And then I guess the newspapers or whatever back then, right, they came after it, and they said, hey, this medication no good. And so his stuff started coming back. Okay.
Wow.
And the doctor kind of thought, I think some of this is psychosomatic. I think some of this is maybe in the head. I don't know. And so he tells the guy, and of course they can't do this nowadays, but he tells the guy that he has an advanced version of it. And he's got, there's an updated formula,
Okay.
advanced version of it, starts giving him saline water, tumor shrink. Okay. And then newspaper comes out, and they end up blasting it, and it comes back, and not a great story. The reason I share that is that how you think matters about your immune system, about sickness. And unfortunately, the media needs power, and they, it is a real disease, right? There's not there's no question there have been people die, there's no question. But the amount of time you spend thinking about it is completely up to you. And so the thinker thinks, the prover proves. That's a quote from a gentleman named George Zalicki. And so if it's what you're thinking about all the time, then I don't know that a vaccine will actually help you. And that's, just my advice is focus on what you want in your life. And that doesn't mean, just gaily skip through life. And you may not be able to gaily skip through life and not think about it. But if you're dwelling on it, if you're catching every single article about it, if you're watching every ounce of news that you can possibly find about it, then that is what's permeating your mind. And that unfortunately, you may see more and more evidence to that. So I'd be very careful what you put in your mind, and, operate on your level of safety, whatever that level is.
Great. And download the immune book. And so
And get
for
the
your
immune book.
download the immune book and build
Not
your
that there's any correlation, just so this doesn't get canceled.
no, no, no. Well, no, there's not between, like, I can't prove that do this and do that.
Right.
But I'm just saying that, the stronger you are and mind, body, and there's all sorts of studies that are out there in terms of,
Sure.
um, you know, attitudes and all that sort of stuff. So anyway, so thank you. Thank you very much, Ray Higdon. You're awesome. Your website again, higdongroup.com.
Yep.
Read the book, Time, Money, Freedom. It's conveniently over his shoulder. Next week, we're going to be talking about mistakes that parents make when they feed their kids.
Ooh.
Nutrition is that building block of all of our healthy bodies for a healthy mind, for a healthy body, for happy emotions. So vital. So that's next week at 4 o'clock. So come join me. Thank you very much, everybody. Go stay safe, stay strong, stay healthy.